So we might be okay.
I think
This
we're all
is a
right.
short commercial break. I haven't done a show in a while, so thank you for the opportunity because I am so resigned and cynical through this whole thing. I left Canada, never thought I would leave my own country. I stood for candidacy 10 times. I ran for leadership of the Green Party in '06 with Elizabeth May and David Chernyshenko. Man, how they've changed. And I've changed too, I've been red pilled. I thought Trump was hilarious, and it's cost me everything really in my big mouth. And like I said, I'm not above mocking and calling names and that kind of stuff. So, and I've never said sorry. I'm not, it's just, I'm pissed off. But when I heard that they were going to stop the unvaccinated from leaving the country, I'm like, I can't be here. I don't want to be stuck anywhere. I want to believe I live in one of the freest countries on the planet. And I had 21 days and I booked it. I booked it on the 1st of October, and by the 22nd I flew out a week before the mandate came in, and it's going to be a year soon. And like the thoughts of me flying back to Toronto, I have nightmares about
too,
that.
right? Mark did it too. It's all right.
So I
You're in good
appreciate the
company.
opportunity because
Brilliant.
I've gotten to the point where I'm black-pilled, where it's hopeless, and every time social media is a sickness for me. I look at it and it makes me angry, and it makes me rage, and it makes me say mean things, and I don't need that kind of stuff. And when I'm busy selling real estate down here, I'm not on social media. It's when I'm bored or I'm hardly ever bored these days, so I haven't been on it a lot. But I appreciate the opportunity. I'm having Shandor on tomorrow. He's the guy that scraped up the stickers in Chopper's Drug Mart and then went to jail for speaking on a megaphone. And
It's that's why I'm sort of struggling, because I'm trying to figure out what sort of like I said, because I never intended to do this. So I'm trying to figure out what kind of an ecosystem I'm creating. And I'm really, really looking hard at that. And, I'm looking at if I'm creating a positive ecosystem or a negative ecosystem. And some of the things I've done are definitely, no doubt, negative. But I've realized too that I can use now my influence to influence people positively to, exercise their rights in productive ways, right? Like I was talking about Elliot McDavid. So the way he yelled at Chrystia Freeland, um, was that illegal? No, he called her bad names, right? It was ugly. I didn't like watching it, but I was like, hold on here, that was a huge missed opportunity. Because if Elliot McDavid had have had a little bit of coaching, he could have asked her some really good questions, and she probably would have just slammed the door in his face and made herself look like the monster that she is. Right? So we have to be able to use these opportunities to our best advantage and not to our detriment, right? Like I'm like, there's a way that you can put your message forward. I'm not going to be the free speech police. If you want to go out, swear at politicians, harass them, you know what? Have at her, right?
Yeah, if it's
Legal, is that the
it's
most productive way
right.
to get your message across? No, it's not. There's much more productive ways to get your message across.
Mm-hmm.
The way to get your message across is to make them look bad, not you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's what I've really focused on, is how to get your politicians to make themselves look bad and not you look bad.
And that's the thing. Every time we look at them, they're so cringe, and everything they do is corrupt, and everything they do is broken. They could, as my father would say, they fuck up a one-car funeral. Like it's not. They do it to themselves. So it's hardly surprising that a guy like that is that pissed off and that filled with rage to come off like that. And I agree completely with you. The discourse, we could use to lower the temperature a little bit, but we wouldn't be in this position if you weren't seizing Canadians' bank accounts and locking them down and ruining their lives and telling us it's for the greater good and a new normal's around the corner and selling hope. And my heart breaks mostly for the kids, but also for the 80% of the people that just do what they're told. I can't believe we live in a society where the masses can be duped so easily. Like from the beginning, the The masks don't do anything. As far as I'm concerned, this is a contact sport. You touch a surface that somebody else touches and then do what you're doing right now. You touch your eye, you're infected. I don't believe that, I always grew up with the knowledge, it could be fake news, I don't know, but my belief was always you could be in an elevator with someone with a contagious cold, coughing and spitting and sneezing and whatever. As long as they don't sneeze in your face, you getting what they've got just from being in that enclosed spaces, as long as you don't touch them or then, something they touched, you're not going to get it. So I don't know about this airborne virus and you just breathe the air and now you're sick. Anyways, I was, really stunned by how many people just bought in, and it broke my heart. I thought we had a bigger, we were more informed, we had more independent thinking, we could make up our minds. And no, most of the people just in my hometown, when we did the mask thing, we put it on it was mandatory indoors where you couldn't social distance. And the next day, everyone had them on the street in their cars. Like they went way overboard with it. I'm like, first of all, why would you think putting a cloth diaper on your face is good for you? Second of all, why can't you stand up and just say no, enough? And now we know the mask didn't work. Social distancing didn't work. Wash your hands. So anyways, I'm blathering. It's not about me, but I sense.
No,
sure,
I understand what you're saying. So this is something interesting about me is that I grew up in the Greater Toronto area. I went to McMaster University. I lectured there. And I actually worked at Credit Valley as well. And I worked at Credit Valley during the SARS outbreak in 2003. So I was one of the first people who was exposed to a SARS patient in the GTA, and I had to quarantine. I had to choose which hospital I would go to. And of course, SARS was a different animal. It had a mortality rate for young people, that was approaching 11, 12%. So it was a really, really terrifying respiratory disease, but not nearly as virulent. But I mean, if anybody ever said, here, you know what, put on a cloth mask and go deal with this SARS patient, I would have been like, yeah, no. I'm going to take my fit tested, N95, whatever that might be. I mean, when you work with actual, super virulent contagious diseases that are really detrimental in hospitals, you go through these fit testings once a year. So you go through various N95 masks. They'll fit test you to make sure that you've got an excellent seal and things like that to prevent transmission. When you're working with people with things like active TB, right? Things like that. So, I actually went through this with SARS in 2003. And so I was kind of laughing when our health officials were like, yeah, you can just wear whatever mask you want in 2020, but wear it or else you'll get a ticket. And I'm kind of like, well, okay. I would never, if this was like a deadly disease, I would never be like, okay, I'm just going to slap a cloth mask on my face that I bought at Shoppers Drug Mart
I'm sure
and pretend that this is protecting me.
Right.
And you're going to ticket me if I'm not wearing this and pretend like this is reducing transmission. These are not the standard procedures that are followed in hospitals at all. Or, airborne, virulence, respiratory diseases. These are not the standards. Right. But yet all of a sudden they were sort of, enshrined into pandemic law for some reason. And I'm like, sure. Do they help a little bit? Is it a layer? Yeah, sure. Maybe it's a layer of protection. But let's face it, a layer of protection against what? Most of our population was vaccinated. And the bulk of our population was never really at huge risk at all. That's what the data says. And we didn't
intentionally protect the ones that we knew right off the bat. We knew right off the bat the average age was 80 for deaths.
We trapped them. We trapped them into long-term care homes. We said that basically you have to stay in your care homes. You can't get out. You can't go outside. You can't leave. You have to stay in your rooms. And so what we actually did is and there was a great study did. I wish I had it on hand. There was actually a great study done really early on in the pandemic, and it showed that lockdowns were the most effective when they were extremely brief and harsh. So we're talking about under 2 weeks and then done. And they actually showed that, people who were locked into long-term care facilities and things like that, may have had an increased risk of transmission because they weren't allowed to escape from that environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
We locked our seniors into homes where people weren't allowed into, right? There was, there was poor staffing. We laid off a whole bunch of staff. Long-term care staff wouldn't go to work. My mom worked in long-term care. She did great in her long-term care home. They never got any sort of an outbreak or anything, but that was really, really rare in the GTA. That wasn't the norm. The norm was that there was outbreaks, and these outbreaks ripped through these long-term care facilities because they lacked proper protective equipment. There was no hand sanitizer or things like that at the beginning. I mean, I can remember my mom texting me and she was like, "Can you find me a homemade recipe for hand sanitizer?" And she's working in a long-term care home in the GTA, right?
Mm.
And I'm like, "Okay, here's a recipe if you can find these ingredients, right? Here you go." So I mean, this is what they were dealing with early on in the pandemic. But I mean, it was bonkers because we were sending out PPE all over the planet like this was never going to hit us.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, most of that PPE came back in the form of gifts from foreign countries, right? Especially China. Like we sent out how many tons? I think it was 16 tons of PPE to China in the beginning of the pandemic. Then Huawei turned around and they were like, "Well, we're going to return the favor. We're going to give you all that PPE back." And I was like, "Of course, Huawei is going to give us all this PPE back that China desperately needs." I mean, you would think that if China really needed PPE, they would be getting it from an internal source like Huawei, not, and Huawei wouldn't be giving it away to a country that's maybe thinking about banning their 5G technology. Like, let's get real here, people. What's going on here?
Mm.
I mean, if you guys needed it, you would have kept it. You wouldn't have sent it to Canada as we're trying to make a ruling as to whether Huawei should be included in our 5G network, right? I mean, like, let's open our eyes here. And so, yeah, I mean, there's so many of these moments where you're just like, something has gone wrong here, but they won't give it up. They won't relinquish this. They won't walk it back because nobody likes to be wrong. I mean, I don't like to be wrong either. But let's face it, though, a lot of things went wrong here, right? There was not the proper scrutiny. There was a lot of foreign influence. There was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of fear mongering, right? And there was a lot of power grabs that happened that, people don't want to relinquish. And so those are all important things that we have to acknowledge. And I agree with you that we're going to be unpacking this for decades, if not the next century. Honestly, I mean, this was an unprecedented thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I mean, the kids for sure. I mean, we've seen kids. That was one of my first concerns is, we have a low risk age group who has been, who is not able to receive their education. And so my daughter was 1.5 when the pandemic hit. So she went basically a full 2 years, never talking to anybody aside from her immediate family. And these are the most important years for language, right? From the time you're like 1 till 3, this is when you gain language skills. So she basically learned to talk only within the members of her own house. This was hugely concerning to me. And whenever she went out of the house, she had to wear a mask, right? So she had no way of learning unverbal communications, right? And things like that. Like, and there's so many things when it comes to talking to people. Even right now, I'm looking at your face. There's nuance, right? My words don't matter anywhere as much as my nuance matters and things like that, right? How you present yourself. So those things are all so important, and our kids missed out on that, and they're going to be nailed big time. And I think the huge tragedy of this is that what we're going to see probably in the future is that kids are going to have an even harder time relating to each other and other people in the real world. And probably they're going to have an easier time relating to online life, which is already dangerous before this. Social media, kids took to social media en masse during the pandemic. It was how they communicated. It was already a little bit of a slippery slope, a little bit of a dangerous place for them to go. Unbridled access to YouTube, TikTok, all these platforms that are not really well policed. And so these are what kids use during the pandemic. And so I think that what we're going to see is that we're going to see because the kids were not taught proper in-person verbal and nonverbal communication. I think that we're going to see them increasingly turning to online communication because that's what they were conditioned to use. But and you know it's a pretty sad story.
Hmm. You know, you said something that just kind of resonated with me. I'm willing to concede the point. Social media is dangerous because I'm normally the guy. I'm like dangerous, whatever. What words aren't violence, blah blah blah. So maybe not in that sense, although it could be used for that. I don't think it is much. I'm not a believer in, you know, we hold women down and we're racist. I don't buy into that whole. Yeah, you have isolated incidents, but people get mocked and yelled at because they're shitty people. Like we don't. You know, there are like we're so tolerant now. You know, and. You know, but dangerous from this the mental health standpoint, if you put it in that context, then I think it is very dangerous for all of us that are out here engaged in this, and it's affecting us one way or another, not in a very good way. I'm not, you know, like the kids that are growing up with parents that limit their screen times or don't let them go online, I think are going to be way better off for it. You know, like I feel polluted by social media. It's an addiction for me. It's like a drug. I feel like, you know, I need it for marketing and promotion and all that kind of stuff. But no, I go out there and it's almost like, I mean, I remember having Primo on or somebody there, you know, a year ago. And I'm like, you know, am I one of those guys that wakes up in the morning and then goes to Twitter to find out what to be raged about? Like, have I fallen into that? That's my dopamine. That's my drug. I just go find people to get pissed off at because that's all that's on Twitter. It doesn't make you feel good, you know. But or you get an echo chamber and everyone agrees with you. So yeah. When you said dangerous, I'm like, yeah, dangerous. Yeah, dangerous.
It is dangerous. It is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I've fallen into that trap myself, right? Where I'm just like going out there and I'm like, I can score a lot of points if I say this. But I'm trying to rein that in and be like, wait a minute, is this sort of the best use of my time? You know, how is this going to make this other person feel? You know, there's a lot of bot accounts out there and things like that, but there's also a lot of real people behind these accounts that put a lot of work into them. So, you know, is this my job is to go out there and go to war with the other side of social media every day? Is that productive? No, it's much more productive for me to be researching, finding documents, finding contracts, you know, finding stories, things like that, putting it out there, trying to be not biased. Although obviously I have an issue with the government, the current government, not necessarily liberals in general. People are like, you know, you hate liberals. I'm like, I actually don't hate liberals.
I've been hating whoever's in power for a long
Previous
time.
liberals. I love some previous NDPers and even some Greens, right? And I certainly love the Reform Party. So I'm like, it's really not. I just have a huge issue with the way that this particular liberal government has conducted themselves. I think that they've conducted themselves in a way that is extremely unbecoming. So that's not what, but I'm like, you know, would it be better served, you know, should I get into these, you know, these mass wars, you know, with these big accounts and try to, you know, bring them down? No, that's actually not the best use of my time. The best use of my time is just to research, throw up documents, be like, this is what's happened. This is what I found. You know, take that at how you will, right?
Yeah, you mentioned Preston, or I'll mention Preston Manning. Wow, I heard him on with Jordan Peterson, and wow, and I'm going to fanboy a little bit here. Jordan Peterson, I mean, I've got a degree in Jordan Peterson. I took his course. You know, I've watched all of his content from the early days because I'm fascinated by psychological lectures. I'm like, what's not to be fascinated about the human mind, the human condition, you know, the way we work. And yeah, I was obsessed with it, you know, because it was all I was learning. I was taking university lectures. And when he dissected Genesis, and I think he did Exodus as well. Wow. So, yeah, when you mentioned that he freaked out, what, you got some pub from JBP? I've missed that completely, or I wasn't familiar. No, I wasn't
he had
connected.
a right proper meltdown when I was deplatformed. He really went to town for me, bless his heart. You know, and I was, you know, yeah. So there was some articles written, yeah. So he was like, you know, Twitter censor me too, I dare you.
Oh, that okay, yeah. So I do remember it. Refresh me
he
on
really
what
loved it. So
what
that's good.
time it was. What and what
Um,
did we haven't told the story of that, how that went down, have we? Yeah, refresh my
how I
memory.
got deplatformed.
Yeah, and
Well,
what
no,
he was
maybe that'll
tweeting.
be for next time.
Okay.
I probably
Yeah,
have
we
to
got
go,
10
but
minutes.
we can bring up some tweets and stuff if you like.
Okay.
But
Yep.
anyways, yeah, no, he really did go to town for me. Very cool. Yeah, we he sort of picked me up when I was covering the convoy. I never really expected to be picked up by somebody like that.
Hmm.
I'm gonna say that I
Oh, the
don't agree
convoy,
with
right?
all of
Okay.
his all of his stuff,
Hmm.
but I do really appreciate what he brings to the table thought wise. And I think
He's a
that's
deep
really, really
thinker.
important
Hmm.
to note is that, you know what? You don't have to agree with
No.
everybody to appreciate what they bring to your table.
Hmm.
You're never going to grow if you don't get out of your echo chamber and think
Hmm.
about things, right? That's so important. And that's something that I'm learning too, right? Is that listen to people who don't agree with me, try to see their point of view, right? Try to understand why they're coming from, why they think, the way that they're thinking. Try to make them understand why you're thinking the way that you're thinking, right? And that is psychology, like in and of itself, right? Is deconstructing the mind and how we work. And so all of our minds are very, very different. But I think that, if we look harder, we can put aside partisanship and find more commonality than we think.
Amen.
And so that's what I'm really, really interested in doing right now is trying to, not contribute to an unhealthy environment, not contribute to an unhealthy online environment, an unhealthy social media environment, things that could be harmful. I'm much more interested in if I can forge, friendships, bridges, alliances with people who are different than me, and try to, have a reasonable discourse and show that, yeah, this is possible, right? We don't have to be divisive. We don't have to act the way that we're acting. We can be better than our politicians. We can rise above all this, right? And we can have really good conversations that are really, really interesting to people
Hmm.
that do not necessarily have to revolve around us tearing each other apart,
Amen. I'm just
right?
going out with your tweet that you sent me over earlier about Blackstone.
Oh man, you do not want to get into that now. That's an hour long in and of itself. I
Yeah.
can tell you, if you want to have me back, I'll tell you a fantastic story about that tweet.
All right.
It was before my old account was censored.
Hmm.
I had a huge thread on that. It had 1.2 million views.
Nice. I love it when
Yeah.
it goes viral. Good
So,
for
and
you,
it
man.
translated into multiple different languages.
Awesome.
So it was a massive thread. So if you want to go into that, we should probably do it another day.
Perfect. I appreciate
Um,
your time. Thanks for doing it. And it was nice to get to
yeah,
know you, and glad to put a
it was
face to
good
the
to get to know
Twitter
you
account. Yeah.
too. Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
having me on,
Okay.
and anytime. It was, yeah. I mean, this is what we're doing, right? We're networking. Like I said, this is a fantastic, fascinating time in our lives when we can, we're not dependent on, the normal channels for news and information, things like that, right? You can go to alternative sources. You can get alternative media sources. You don't have to agree with them, but search them out, right? Go outside your box. You might be
Amen.
you might be surprised by what you find sometimes
All
if you go
right.
outside your box.
I agree with you. Well, as tradition, I'll tell you I love you because I love everyone I talk to, and
I love you too.
try to practice it with the people I don't talk to. It's hard to get liberals to come on and talk to me. And, I end up talking to people I agree with a lot. So I do appreciate the personal depth that you went into. And I look forward to you to hitting our fast moving show on something that you're breaking soon. So it's great
Yeah,
that you're
yeah.
at the front
I've got some
edge
good
of,
stuff coming up.
yeah, it's great. It's kind of, I'm putting, trying it on a little bit. How cool is it that people come to you with information? You know what I mean? Like I'm out of the game. I'm in Dominican Republic. I'm selling real estate. I'm not doing. I had a buddy say, Jimmy, why aren't you broadcasting the trucks? I go, because I don't care. And he goes, but the clicks. And I go, yeah, and I don't care about that. I'm trying to get my life together down here and build it. Like I left everything in Canada, right? And then when Maxine Bernier and Randy Hilliard did the press conference, I've been so starved for good, solid leadership on the microphone. And they answered all the media's questions perfectly with science. I'm like, this is my Canadian. I put the flag back in my Twitter account because I took it out. I was ashamed, but you know, and that was like, yeah, I wasn't moved by the truckers or anything like that. But that one press conference, was like, these are good Canadian patriots, men standing up for the women and children and men all over the country that are getting it raw right now. So, yeah, that was my turning
I've
point.
talked to both of them, Max and Randy. I feel very badly about what happened to Randy. I said, Randy, you might want to try to tone it down. I'm worried. And unfortunately, he did, of course, end up being arrested. So
Yeah, a lot of good people. They
I say,
arrested Max too.
State of the country, right? But anyways, yeah, no. We've had differences too. I mean, we've had wicked spats, right? I mean, me and Max and me and Randy have gone at it. We've had like wicked spats online and things like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think that we all understood that, ultimately it's okay to have different opinions. That's what I'm getting at, is that's fine. It doesn't mean that that's not an important part of learning, finding your way, finding your path. And disagreement is just as important as in democracy as agreement is, if not even more important. I would say that tolerating disagreements, dissidents, and people who go against the norm is more vital to democracy than people who just go along with it.
Amen.
Right? That's what keeps democracies vital. So yeah, lots of love for those two characters, and for sure. And if they're listening, hi. I'm sure we'll see each other again in Ottawa. I don't think that our stories are done. I'm not sure what rules exactly we're going to play yet, but yeah.
Well, thanks for taking time away from your family. I can hear that they're waiting for you, so I appreciate the opportunity.
I like playing over there.
Awesome. My favorites. We'll invite them on next time if they're not camera shy, but
they'll bomb you all day long.
That'd be cool. All right. Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it. Good stuff. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Jim. Take care.
Bye.
Recordings.
And that's how you do that. The Andy Lee Show. Catch her on Twitter, catch her on the YouTube, catch her on our own website here. The links are in the show description below. The Real Andy Lee Show. Here she is on the YouTube. And yeah, we started it out with this and then we didn't hit it, but sometimes the first hour, like, I don't know this woman and I appreciate her work, so I kind of want to get the background of like who is the person that I'm talking to without hitting a whole bunch of issues really hard. So that was a good backgrounder. Good first interview, and I look forward to having her on again soon, especially because she's working on stuff. She's in a position where people bring her news, break stories. And yeah, there it is. That's how you do that. The Real Andy Lee Show. Catch her on all the links in the show description below. Peace, love, hug your neighbor, and whatever. Stop masking the fucking children. I love you. I'm out.